Hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode number
17.
Very good. Yes. Number 17 already. We can't believe it. We just started in March and we have nearly 20 episodes and the year is nearly done.
Yeah,
Crazy.
So much more exciting stuff coming up, but thanks for sticking for the first 20. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Without further ado, we would like to welcome our beautiful Parisian guest, Anne-Laure. Anne-Laure is a French civil and architectural engineer, and she has been in Australia since 2015. She moved to Australia because she fell in love with Melbourne when she was doing her exchange program back in 2008, and she had visited Melbourne at the time. And while she was in France, she practiced as an ESD consultant, which, for anyone wondering what ESD means, it is ecologically sustainable design. But in Australia, she moved from ESD to facade engineering. So she'll be sharing a little bit about how having that dual degree in both civil and architectural actually comes, in handy in so many different ways and opens up different sort of pathways and thinking. You'll be finding that super interesting as well. She also has this crazy, counterintuitive, will blow your mind away background because, it's nothing like we've ever heard before. She actually started roller derby back in 2013 in France, practically fell in love with the sport. So when she moved to Melbourne, had to keep going and joined the Victorian Roller Derby League. And she got selected into this C team, which was the notorious VICs in 2016, and then moved her way up to the B team, the Queen Bees. And in 2017, she got selected into the A team, the All Stars, which were the number one team in the world at the time. Now we'd like to take you to the woman herself, Anne-Laure. Welcome, Anne. Thanks so much for joining us today, and let's just get started into this. So we believe a lot of our trajectory in life and where we end up, lies in our childhood. And so if you could just take us back and tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be really amazing.
I'm from France, as you can probably pick up with the accent. I'm from Paris. I studied engineering and architecture there. I've got master's degrees in both engineering and architecture. I work as a facade engineer in Melbourne. And like I said, I was working as an ESD consultant in Paris as well beforehand. Moved to Australia in 2015. I started roller derby in 2013. And the Melbourne team used to be number one in the world. So when I moved to Melbourne at the time, I joined them and slowly got better training with them. And eventually in 2017 onward until 2019, I traveled internationally, mainly to the US, and also within Australia, interstate, to play games and play at the highest level.
Wow. How was growing up in Paris? I went there in July and it was beautiful. I think it's one of my favorite cities in the world.
I'm going to be very disappointing because Paris is great as a tourist. I enjoy going back now as a tourist. Living there, though, is not as good. Also because I didn't grow up in Paris itself. I grew up in the suburbs. It's like Dandenong from Melbourne. I don't know if that, Logan from Brisbane. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
So not very, not as exciting. Look, it was fine. It was fine. I was, I grew up in middle class area. Diversity was a lot bigger than what it is in Australia in general. Yeah, it was great. Although France in general, to be honest, I find is a lot more sexist than Australia. At least more open about it. Australia's a bit more subtle. You still have sexist guys all around, but yeah, it was, to me anyway, coming here was like a relief, just because of the street harassment. I don't know if you experienced that when you were in Paris, but every time you go out, there's always going to be a guy that's going to talk to you. They never, if you just make eye contact, they're going to think that that's their good reason to speak with you. So yeah, you have to, I grew up with that. Yeah. And I also grew up with two older brothers that made me really strong because I had to fight literally with them. So yeah.
Yeah, like tell us a little bit more about you, I guess your childhood and growing up with two brothers.
Look, my brothers were, let's just say, tough love, right? So they that's, I'm a strong personality, and I think partly because of my grandmother, who's also very strong, and my mom and all of that, but also because, well, I had to fight, just literally even for food, like, if I did. So it was like, on the table, they would get the best piece. If I didn't fight, I wouldn't get, I would get the shitty leftovers. So yeah, that was just,
This sounds
makes you
rough.
strong. It makes you strong and makes you learn how to fight for yourself.
Character building, for sure. I
Yeah.
do have a brother, and I grew up with a few cousins, male cousins. And
Yeah.
I agree. You do build up thicker skin. They pick on you too much.
It is true.
Look, I'm grateful for it now because, like, I don't take any shit from anyone. But yeah, that was a tough learning.
Oh, holy moly.
Right.
I am curious, sorry, a little bit about the Paris part and like, the sexism on the street. Was there like just people coming up to you, or is there like catcalling? Is that a thing?
Oh, both.
Just out in the street?
Both.
Okay.
So they, like, you walk on the street and whatever you wear, right? Whatever you wear, they're like, it's like whistle or like, oh, hi girl, that type of thing. And, and I've been followed a couple of times in public transport. Once I was, he was a guy sitting across me, and then he was putting his hands he was sitting with his elbows on his knees, and then his hands were like literally between my knees. He was like starting to rub his hands against my knees. So I kind of pushed him over. Then he eventually left. But then a couple of stops later, when it was actually my stop, come off, leave the train station. And at some point I turned around, the same guy was there. And I walked up to my place, and then getting there was like a code, a locked door with a code, but it was glazed. Go through it, and then the moment it locked, I turned around and the guy was there, right? And then I got in my apartment, and then literally did not even switch off the light and just stay there in the dark for like hours until he left. And that was one of them. The other time, it was a different place. The guy followed me. They stopped me in the street, be like, "Hey, how you going?" And like literally stops, put himself in front of me, and I was like, "Oh, do you want to chat?" I'm like, "No, I'm not interested." He's like, "Oh, I want to be friends." I'm like, "I've got enough friends, mate. I'm not interested." And then, all of this happening, I was still walking, because if you stop, then it's the end of it. So you've got to keep walking. The guy kept following me and trying to chat with me until I was seeing that I was getting closer to my place. And then this time around, I actually stopped, turn around, be like, "What do you want? Are you just going to follow me up to my place?" Quite aggressively. And that was enough for him to stop. But yeah, it's
Wow.
and the stories like that, and you also have I never actually, I experienced it only once, lucky me, but you also have when you go on a public transport, it's very famous there. That we call them the frotteur, which is rubbing. So the guy that when it's really packed, they go against you, they fucking, sorry, F word. They rub their private parts against you, if not more. I've been pretty lucky on that side, as in it's happened to me once, and it's never been. I think it was just a hand when it happened, but like I've got some friends that had pretty terrible stories there.
You said it's regardless of what you wear. That's like goes against, anything people say that, if you dress up nicely, like,
You ask for
it's
it.
kind of their fault, Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They see you as a target, whatever you wear. They see you as a target. And if I find that, because I grew up in a pretty rough suburb, right, I had to deal with, dodgy people around me from a very early age. So I built up that face that I really have to be quite aggressive in the way I looked. And that actually protected me, because they could see they couldn't, mess up with me. I know some friends that don't have the same experience, probably a bit more like, shy or anything like that. They've had more experience of this type of behavior. And I'm sure that's all about power. That's all about power. They see you're not strong, they will go for you. 100%. It's nothing to do with the way you look. It's all about power and control.
That is awful.
Crazy. So did you go university in that same location or?
Yeah. No, so it was like, the equivalent of Dandenong from Melbourne, but then Versailles. Have you ever heard of Versailles?
Yeah.
Yes.
with like the big
The Treaty
castle
of
and all that.
Versailles.
So I was living,
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah.
I was living 15, 20 minutes away from there, right? That's where I grew up. Then I spent 2 years there. Very different, very, very different environment, because Versailles is very, very Christian conservative.
Oh,
So
okay.
me coming from like a really dodgy, rough area, with very big diversity, coming to Versailles where they're all like pretty much white Christians, conservative people. That was a big change for me. So I did 2 years there, and then in France, you've got that thing like when you want to do an engineering degree, we've got what we call the best, the royal path. It's called. That would be the direct translation. It's like when you're one of the best, you would follow that path. So you got 2 years of what we call preparatory class. It's literally just physics and math class all week for like 35 hours. You've got an exam for 4 hours every Saturday morning, and you have no life whatsoever for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Literally no life. You don't go out. You just study, from 7 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m. at night. And then at the end of those 2 years, you have that like national examination. That's like a competition. And whoever gets the best grade can pick the best uni, or pick the uni they want, really. And well, obviously they just pick the best ones. And then, the less good the results are, the, less good unis you can get. So I did those 2 years in Versailles. Did the examination competition exam thing. Didn't get the best grades, but then I already had in mind to do the engineering and architectural double degree. So I actually picked the one uni that was offering it. I could go there because it was not one of the top ones, but it was good enough for me anyway. And then from there, I did 3 years of engineering, masters of engineering, at the same time as 3 years of bachelor of architecture. And then at the end of the 3 years, I did 2 years of masters of architecture.
You say that you already knew what you wanted to do, like for your career. How did you know, and how did you discover that that was sort of like the mix that you wanted to do, especially because engineering and architecture are a little bit different, but they do, it's really important that an architect knows about engineering and vice versa.
Yeah. So first, the two unis were both in Paris. So in high school, I had that specialization. So when you enter high school, which is year 10 to 12 in Australia, you have to kind of start picking where you want to go. It's either you like literature and art and all of that, or like business, all that kind of thing, or engineering and math. So I went through engineering and math, and my specialization there was what we called engineering science, and it was all about there was a bit of programming, there was a bit of like robot building, some robots there, there was some mechanical engineering, there was a bit of everything, right? Through those 3 years, I knew that this was my thing, but I've always also been into art stuff. I like drawing, I like music, all that kind of thing. So after, reaching year 12, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I did my VC, I think it's called in Victoria. I don't even know what's the name in the other states, but I did my VC. I had good grades. And then the good thing about that preparatory class is that it remains still fairly general. So you can still, it's still just physics and math, and you don't specialize in anything. So I did those two in specialization in it was like physics, chemistry, and math pretty much. And during those 2 years, during the summer break, I actually did an internship at an architect firm that my dad knew for like 2 weeks, because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do car design, because that was also something that I was interested in, or, going into construction. So these 2 weeks with that architect, who made me draw a little bit, took me on site, all that kind of thing, I was like, yeah, I really enjoy that. I think that's what I want to do. But because I liked engineering as well, I didn't really want to pick between the two. And that double degree was kind of like the obvious choice for me. Yeah.
So was your father an architect? Did he?
My father is a civil engineer.
Oh, your dad is a civil engineer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, we are a family of engineers. My father is a civil engineer. My brother is a structural engineer. My other brother is a mechanical engineer, as in cars. My mom is a teacher, and I'm an architect and an engineer.
So is that sort of where you'd say the exposure to this field came from?
Yeah, I think partly. Obviously, he had the contacts about knowing an architect that could just take me in for like 2 weeks, right? Also because I could see him do the things and like, he was in bridge and tunnels and all of that, right? So that obviously helped with the exposure to engineering. But like both, my mom was also very much into science. I think if her whole story is different, but like I think in a different time frame. I think if it was our generation, she probably would have been a doctor or something. She went to teaching for different reasons, but I think in different times she probably would have been a doctor. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you make that comment. We're very lucky now. I guess not lucky. We just work really hard to get where we are as females, and
Yeah.
it's good that we have the opportunities we have. Yeah. So if you were to describe yourself as a student, what would you say your strengths were and what were your weaknesses?
Oh, I was very hardworking. Like, yeah, that I can do. I can work really hard. I fight really hard. I don't give up. The one weakness I had when I was younger, especially it's getting better with age, was anxiety and probably being not lack of confidence would be one of the big ones, really. I never thought, like, in high school, I was that kid that would get out of exam and think I ruined everything and like I had a worst grade and, blind, and I get the results and actually I did really good. I was probably very annoying to my friends, students at the time. But yeah, I was that person friend that really had, I was that one.
Do you think you were like a hard achiever?
I'm definitely a overachiever, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Because it's never good enough for me.
Okay. And how much of an impact has that had into you, like professional life and into balancing, like your self-perception and all of that?
Look, my self-perception is still a work in progress, let's just say it that way. But overachiever has been a good thing because, I have such a high standards in what I do that, everything that to me is not acceptable, when I look around, and no offense to my male colleague, but generally still, what they, my standard is just much, much, much higher than what theirs are. So they seem to accept a lot more some work that it's just not up to the standard that I would accept for myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It has to be perfect. It comes from my dad as well. When I grew up, it was never good enough. So, you have like 90% success, 90% in a mark on a
I can definitely relate to that.
And my dad was like, well, you get 100%, you get second in a competition. When do you get first, So growing up with that played in the lack of confidence, but also played into the overachieving part. So
that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, because you did mention that there was like one of your weaknesses was lack of confidence, but was it because of the fact that you have such a high standards? It's like it's never good enough. So even though you are confident and you know that you can do it, it's like it's probably not good enough.
I don't actually, interestingly enough, I rarely think I can do it, but I go anyway. Because, I would feel worse if I didn't try. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's and awesome. I think it's really important to. I love that we are heading towards this direction, because I feel like when we talk about bringing girls into engineering, and I was talking about this with someone last night, a lot of girls hesitate even to apply. A lot of women hesitate to apply to jobs or to even enter the industry just because they think that there's better people out there for the role, or there's better people out there for their career.
Yeah.
But you said there was something that tells you that is like, I rather give it a go regardless of how perfect I am.
During my engineering journey, right, after high school, I had different choices. I could go what I call, the royal path, as going to preparatory class, then proper, it's not proper, but like, one of the best engineering uni, or go the easiest path of just going to probably less, how would you call it? um, I wouldn't say shiny. I can't quite find the right word, but it's something not quite perceived as good in France anyway. As a uni, it's not that it's not as good. It's just a different pathway that's just not as perceived as good. And that's the one I wanted to go to. And both my parents told me, nah, go for the top. You always have the chance to go for less if you fail. Whereas if you go for less to start with, you'll never know whether you could have done better. And I think that was probably a turning moment for me anyway, because that's right. Go for the top, and then if you fail, at least you can still, go for less. But if you restrain yourself from the start, then you never know whether you could actually go higher, right?
Wow. Yeah, that is a great advice to have.
Wow.
Me immigrating to Australia was a similar story, to be honest. I was done with friends. I was, the environment was just too stressful for me. And also at work, I could see I could never, there would never be any path up.
Wow.
And I would have been stuck in that position for so long before being able to go up, because there's a lot more older people there, and then held up on the top jobs, and they don't want to retire, they don't want to leave their jobs and their power. So I was like, if the top doesn't move, then under doesn't move as well, right? It's not that I wanted to go to the top straight away, but like the next step was already hard enough. So, and also Paris was just too stressful. I had enough, and because I was an exchange student in the Melbourne uni in 2008, fell in love with Melbourne. I loved it. I promised myself then that I would come back one way or another. And then at the time, we decided, when I got with my ex-partner, I told him, when we got together, I was like, one day I'll just go abroad and work there. So it's either you come with me or you don't, but that's going to happen. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll follow you. And then after 3 years, 3 years together, I was done. He was done. He was like, all right, let's go. This is time. It's either we get kids and buy a place and stay here forever, or this is now or never that we move somewhere else and try something different. So we decided to emigrate somewhere temporarily. We didn't know for how long. And then, there was a few countries in the mix. We wanted an English-speaking one because it was just easier. I didn't speak Spanish. He speaks Spanish, but I don't. And then I have a bit of German, but he doesn't. So English was the way to go. And, eventually we went down to Australia and New Zealand. And New Zealand was easier to get a visa for, in my position anyway. And Australia was the hardest one. But I really, really wanted to come back to Australia. So we were like exactly the same, right? We're like, let's try Australia. And if it doesn't work, then we can still try New Zealand as a, plan B. And turns out Australia worked, and we never had to go to New Zealand. And, if I went to New Zealand first, I would have never experienced the life that I've got right now. So,
yeah, you're always one decision away from a completely different life, right? What made you pick Australia as when you wanted to do your exchange program?
I've got a long love with Australia. When I was a kid, I loved kangaroos and stuff like that. And then, look, I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure you know of the show Heartbreak High. It was a big show when I was a teenager, right? And me and my best friend at the time were absolutely in love with it. And it's recording in Sydney. And I absolutely love that show so much. And that plus kangaroos, koala, whatever, I was like, yep, I need to go to Australia. So when the chance to come to Melbourne as an exchange student came up, it was no question for me. I came, and 6 months here, absolutely loved the city. I think what I loved the most was the chill attitude. In France and in Europe in general, there's a lot of rules, a lot of, you got to do things a certain way, and like it's very restrictive. Whereas like here, people are like, that's fine, it's cool, and I needed that. It's questionable in some ways, but for me, I really need that mentality for me to, part of that me wanted to being an overachiever, never being good enough. He was like, nah, it's okay, and I needed that for myself. And that's why I loved it so much at the time. And yeah, coming back here, it's been, I'm happy here. But there's a lot of cultural differences.
Any that was shocking and you were just like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Apart from the language, maybe, because the language is always like the hardest one, especially the accent. Australians
Oh yeah, the
especially in
first time
Queensland?
yeah. Look, the first time I set foot in Melbourne, I remember I had some nice books in a hostel somewhere in the city. And I remember, I stepped in there. It was 5 a.m. in the morning. I was jet lagged. And then the reception person, started having a chat. And I remember they were like, well, so where are you from? And I did not understand the question. And I was like, after like making me repeat like twice, I was like, yes. In the hope
You
that I
didn't
would
even answer the
work because you
question.
don't know. No, I was like, oh, where are you from? Well, yes, I don't know. Because I didn't understand, right? Because the Australian accent was just so hard to understand. But the English, I picked it up because I had no French friend around here. I had to pick up the English. The first three were really hard, but then eventually I was fine. But to answer the question, the bigger cultural differences, oh, yeah, definitely the chill attitude towards things. Like, um, something that I noticed also um, is, I think the pandemic probably showed that a lot, is the trust in the leaders. And, in France, corruption and all of that. I mean, you probably know a lot. It's probably worse. It's pretty bad, the corruption and all of that. So you don't trust. No people have faith in their
Mm.
politicians. Whereas here, so during when lockdown happened and all of that, especially in Melbourne, obviously when you had 8 months, everyone was following the rules like really well. Like it was quite incredible. Whereas back home, they had none of those lockdowns. They had like maybe 6 weeks in April 2020, and that was it. Probably a roughly where everyone had one. And the rules were a lot more restrictive than what we got here at the time anyway. Then it was a bit similar for our second lockdown in Melbourne. No one was following them. Like, people didn't really care as
I
much.
have to agree with you in that one because that was one of the things that I also picked up on after moving from Colombia. It was like just the cult. I think like everyone is really respectful and everyone. I don't know if it's like a first world country sort of like thing, but people just do the right thing. Like they don't get anything out of doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how it works. It was also one of the things that I considered.
I
I don't.
think
Oh,
there's two reasons behind it. I think it's the fact that the culture is probably a bit. Look, obviously, I'm talking about Aboriginal culture has been erased. So Aboriginal culture is one of the oldest ones. So I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about white culture in Australia is very recent compared to
yeah,
even South America. Because
yeah.
you guys have been invaded by the Spanish, but much probably 100 years before Australia, roughly, maybe even
Mm.
before that. So you have more history. Obviously, in Europe, you have a lot more. But also, I think there's a lot of inheritance from the British. If you go to the UK, they also don't follow the rules as much as here, but like queuing perfectly and doing all the things perfectly and all of that is very British. Very British.
Mm.
I would dare
Very
say even
British. It's
very
true.
English.
You're going back to your professional, I guess, story and like why you chose the career you chose. What do you think? Like, what's your favorite thing about having an understanding of civil engineering and architectural design or like architecture?
For facades especially, it's really good. Like, facades is pretty much as if you were designing someone's face, right? You design the building, that's what everyone sees. So you have to understand what the architect's intent is. That's really important. You have to understand what they want. You have to understand how they want the building to look like. And then obviously on the other hand, having that engineering background, I understand all of the technical part of it. So the structural part of it, how it works. I don't do much structural design myself. I understand it, but I've never actually put much numbers together. More specialized in mechanical engineering. So thermal, because of my background on sustainable design, thermal insulation, condensation, all of that. That's what I do. But generally, that helps me in facade specifically. That helps me having a better overall understanding of what I'm doing, right? And that was the same thing for sustainable design back home. I would understand better what the architect wanted and also what were the engineering requirements for it. Because at the time, in sustainable design, it's not just it's not just insulation. It was, when you look into a Green Star certification, you have to look at a building overall, right? It's all about saving water, recycling, carbon emissions, obviously energy consumption, or the whole building. It's a very holistic approach. That double degree really helped with understanding an architectural design requires, but also what are the engineering requirements, because usually architect and engineers, they don't understand each other. You can hear them all the time. Engineers, you hear them all the time saying bloody architect, and then engineer be like, that's engineer saying bloody architect, and the other architect being bloody engineer. They don't understand anything, blah blah blah. It's so there's all, and it's across. I mean, in my experience, I've worked with architect in the UK. I've worked with people in Switzerland, in France, in Australia, in New Zealand. There's like a lack of understanding. They have to work with each other. They complete each other, but the thought process is so different. They really struggle sometimes to understand each other.
Yeah, it's
so
like left
that
and
double
right
degree
brain,
really helps.
almost.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know. I've used in my whole brain, and I just crossed bridges.
Other than the understanding, do you think like having that double degree has put you in like spaces that you wouldn't have gotten without it? Like, has it given you opportunities?
Yeah. Yes, because if I didn't have that, I think first off, I wouldn't have gotten my job in facades, and I wouldn't have been able to jump from sustainable design to facade design when I came to Australia. And the good thing is that back in France, I can build my own house. I've passed because you got a 6 year of like you practicing and like passing some kind of exam presentation to show that you can actually practice on your own. And I can do that too. So if one day I want to go home, I can practice as an architect, I can practice as an engineer, on paper anyway. To me, that pretty much opened a lot more doors as to what I could do. And I also know that, in Australia is not coming back to culture, actually. Australia doesn't value diplomas as much as Europe does. Europe is very much on, your diploma pretty much, decides on your life. Whereas here, it's all about your experience and, how smart you are and the people you know as well.
In the network.
Whereas, which I prefer, in my opinion, because there's a lot more value to it. Someone that is not very good at uni can still be a good engineer because they're smart, The double degree opened to me a lot more door back home. Here, well, clearly also helped me stay. I think that helped me make my CV stand out when I came to Australia, because I literally knew barely anyone, and just like, send CVs pretty much to the whole city and hope for the best. And I think the fact that I had that double degree definitely made me stand out, and that's how I could stay.
What was the driver between going from like sustainable energy or sustainable design towards facades?
Sustainable design in buildings in general. So first off, in France, it became a lot of like ticking boxes, right? Architect already had the design done, and they just wanted you to look at the design and make it work so that it passes the standards, right? Which became very boring because it was kind of always the same thing, right? It was always the same solutions. There was no design per se, because realistically, when you want to do a sustainable design, you have to be involved in the design from the very early on process, so you can include the sustainable principle into the whole building intention and design. Whereas that's not really what happened. You were involved, in like more like DD stage. So, which really didn't, it was not really interesting, because like the building's pretty much, the bases are there without you.
For anyone listening, DD as in detailed design.
So I found it a bit boring. And on that Geneva Airport extension, I actually worked closely with the facade teams there. Because the airport was supposed to be energy positive, as in creates more energy that heat consumes, and to achieve that, you have to have an envelope that's really, really efficient. So I had to work really closely with the facade team to make sure it was designed properly. And I loved it. I was at that project was really like one of the best projects I've worked on, and partly because of that. So coming to Australia, I applied in both because I had the experience in sustainable design, but also facade was really something that I thought would really be good for me. And yeah, lucky me, Oliver and Peter Smithson gave me my chance, and I'm here now. And I got no regret whatsoever, because also sustainable design here, no offense to Australia, but they're very much behind. And I remember coming here and working as a facade consultancy in the sustainable design report. I was like, ooh, okay, there's a lot of work.
Wow. Sustainability is like one of those really buzzwords that we have in the industry, right? And as civil engineers, I feel like every time that you mention something about sustainability, or oh, we have to look into this for the project, everyone's like doesn't want to address it. It's like
it's always the rock in the shoe, you know.
Yeah,
you have to deal with it, but it's really annoying.
Sustainability is different for everyone, and obviously sustainability is different for every industry, but I feel like the one that we are in, difficult to sort of like achieve within a budget.
Yeah, so okay, there's two things, right?
On that, please.
People in general, and particularly in construction, they don't like change, right? They just don't like change. And particularly in construction, because, you know, everything's streamlined, and then changing the streamline means more effort, possibly more risk, more money, all that kind of thing. So in my opinion, and that's what's happening in Europe, right? The change has to come from the top. And that applies for feminism, that applies for a lot of things. The change has to come from the top. So a lot of people criticize the European Union, but they drove that change a lot. And look, the European Union in itself is questionable in many ways, and you can criticize it and all of that. But in France in general as well, like the change came from the top. The government implemented some not rules, but like standards, higher standard in terms of sustainable design, which is slowly happening in the Australian code. In the Australian building code, the BCA. And that's the only way you can get there. And everyone was going to be like, oh, it costs too much money, blah, blah, blah. But then the moment it's there and people have to deal with it, the cost will go up at the start. But then because everyone does it, and we're still in a capitalist world, the cost is going to go down. You know, because everyone's going to do it, and then it's going to be competitive. Yeah. It's going to be competitive, and then the cost is going to go down. It's going to fall into the cost of everything and be a normal cost included in everything, and that's it, you know.
What I'm getting out of this is that if we were going to place more importance in sustainability, it would have to be a push from the government and making sure that the standards are not just, you know, the bare minimum. It's making sure that they are promoting an actual sustainable.
Yeah, and look, when you're in government, there's a lot of things you have to deal with, you know, lobbying, you know, and all of that, and all of this, and you know, there's a lot of politics involved. But like, if you don't strive for better, once again, if you don't strive for better, you're never going to achieve, you know, the middle ground.
That's like the theme for everything. I feel like
you have to, you know, you have to aim art. Yeah, well, I mean, yes.
I guess going back to careers and stuff like that, I'll ask you, do you think if you had the opportunity to pick another career now, like today, if you wanted to do whatever, what would you do? What would you pick?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. I actually quite like construction, you know, as hard as it is sometimes to deal with, you know, difficult people all the time. But yeah, some kind of design. I think something that would involve something more like, you know, make the world better. That's, you know, that's something that strives for, and like that's part of, you know, why I offered to be part of the podcast, because I'm like, I want to show a different world to women, right? I don't have kids. I don't want to have kids. This is just not something for me for different reasons, but that doesn't mean I don't want to be a good role model. Yeah. That doesn't mean I don't want to be a good role model, right? I've got two nieces, they're like 12, and I want to show them that something different exists in this world, right? I've had very strong role model in my family. My grandmother, both my grandmother lived very independently. My grandmother and my great-grandmother, they both live very independently. And my grandmother specifically, she was a single mother at a time when it was really hard. And, she was a very strong character. My dad keeps saying that I look a lot like her, which to me, it says that as a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing.
Compliment.
Ultimate
Yeah,
compliment,
exactly.
Yeah.
But like,
She sounds incredible.
she was great. And she's not part of this world anymore, sadly, but yeah, she was great.
Sorry.
But I do think that I probably would have gone to either sustainable design was kind of what it was, right? Like trying to make something better for the world, and something similar to that. I'm not quite sure, but yeah.
But can we just jump back to 2017? My limited understanding of facades, because I was studying fire safety engineering, but at the time there was the Grenfell fire that happened, and it was huge, and it caused a big ruckus in facades. Did that affect the way your work is approached in facades now? Or
big time, big time. So look, in Melbourne we had the lacrosse building, which was similar to the Glenford Tower. We had that in 2014. There was no death though, but like the whole part of the facade in Docklands went on fire, and because of it's a French backpacker that started the whole thing. It just left a cigarette butt, and then the whole thing, I think it was in like a plastic container. It took fire, fell on the air conditioning system, and then the air conditioning system caught fire, and then was next to the wall, and then it went up the wall. Anyway, that was 2014 in Melbourne. So Australia already was having these kind of discussions at the time, right? Because I think in 2017 the trial was going on. And then obviously the Glenford Tower happened. The moment I saw the Glenford Tower videos, I was like, this is cladding. This is the facade that's going on fire. The moment I saw the videos on the news, I knew that's what it was. And sure as hell, that's what it was. And sadly, though, they had 72 people die there, whereas in Melbourne, in the lacrosse building, they didn't have that because the fire safety design of the building was much better in the Melbourne building compared to the Glenfell Tower. They had a whole heaps of defect there. Like they only had one staircase that was full of fume, so people couldn't go out, and then they didn't have sprinklers. Anyway, there was a whole thing. So it was not just the cladding, but that, yes, after that, Australia decided to ban combustible cladding completely for a while. Wow. Then they allowed 30% polyethylene and all of that. Anyway, there was a whole lot of discussion, but then eventually now a lot of my work in the last couple of years now has been about replacing cladding on buildings, on residential building.
Going back to construction and all of that, have you faced any hurdles for being a female?
All the time.
Yes. Okay.
All the time.
Let's unpack.
We say hurdles to be polite.
Yes. So first off, obviously, when I was younger, a bit less now because I've got more experience, and they can also see that I'm a bit more, outspoken. And when you're a bit young, you don't feel as confident in, and it comes back to not being very confident in myself, but you don't feel as confident to speak up. So they come to you, and then like, how are you going? And like they treat you as a pet. They treat you as a pet. And there's many times I worked on a work site, and I was like, the pet of the work site. Not in a bad way. Like they were not disrespectful, but also quite condescending. Like I was not taken very seriously in everything I was saying. It was just a woman, doesn't really know what I'm doing. I'm here to be pretty. That's it. Obviously that hasn't happened in Australia, but that has happened in France. Colleagues hitting on me. That's happened a couple of times there, that I had to be like, no, this is not okay. On work site, I know there's been a big crack on it in Australia at some point in the past, but in France it's not a thing. So when you go on work site, being cat called and whistled and all of that definitely happened on the regular. And like generally the basic is when you're a woman, people don't take you seriously. So when you're a man, by default, they think you know your shit or your stuff, and they think you know your stuff, and they take you seriously from the start. As a woman, you have to prove yourself. You're never taken seriously from the start. You have to prove yourself. And then once you've proven yourself, then they will listen to you to a certain point. It depends on the men as well. Some of them will never listen to you. But yeah.
But basically being more outspoken just by itself doesn't actually do very much. Like just appearing more confident.
It helps because it does help. It's helped because I've got some friends that were not as confident that got actually, assaulted on site back home. Cornered and then being pushed on against the wall and be like, give me your number, and like trying to, do kiss and stuff. So that never happened to me. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
But that they just do it a bit more subtle, but it's still there. Right.
But for like competency perspective.
Yeah.
Like they don't look at you as more competent just because you're more confident.
No.
Okay.
No. I'll give you an example. I, as part of the recladding process in Victoria, we've got a government organization called Cladding Safety Victoria that's been created by the Victorian government. It's funded by the Victorian government, and it's all about replacing the cladding, provided grants for the buildings in the residential buildings in Victoria, so that the owner corporation don't have to pay for it. Right. Part of this program, I'm involved in different part, but part of it is they brought back the Clerk of Work program, which is Clerk of Work were around 20, 30 years ago in Australia, and they're still here in France, and they're here to check that things have been done right. And so I've been leading that team as part of, the facades team from the start. And it's pretty much sending guys on site all the time. That's all they do. Go on site and check that it's done right. So they go to 3-4 sites a day, every day. So because I'm leading the team, I go with them on a regular, right? If they don't introduce me as their boss, I am almost every single time here to learn, and I'm the intern. I'm here to learn.
What? Oh my gosh.
Every single time. It's become a joke for me. I'm like, all right. It's funny because they think it's interesting. Actually, I don't say anything on purpose because they think I'm the intern and I don't know anything, they can say whatever. So it's good because I let them speak, and then they kind of spill the beans on many things, and then eventually my guys say, well, by the way, this is my boss, and they're like, all of a sudden the face changes, the tone changes, and all of a sudden I exist, right? But if they don't say anything, I'm not really there.
Wow. So it works in your favor for that, for like just taking advantage of their stupidity. No, I'm kidding. But, yeah, because
it's not. Look, they're not all stupid, but they definitely have biased, obvious ones that it's their own problem if they don't fight that and don't actually take the time to question what I'm doing. You just assume that
exactly.
Yeah, so that's pretty rude of them.
I was just going to ask, like you were saying, like colleagues, hitting on you, and you've had to deal with that from like a young girl in construction to now. How have you, I suppose, changed how you react to it when it happens, or how did you deal with it before?
When I was doing it before, I was a bit worried about pushing back. You were a bit nice. I was trying to be nice, being like, "Oh no, I'm sorry," blah blah blah. Whereas now I'm like, "Well, this is not acceptable. What are you doing?" I called them out. I called them out on it, and if they feel uncomfortable with it, this is not my issue. It's theirs, right? That's the big difference for me. I used to not really have the confidence to push back strongly, and now I don't care. I don't care. This is not professional. This is not acceptable. So it still happens. Not to me though. Not anymore. Also because I'm a bit older. But like one of my colleagues here, she's younger than me. She's pretty, so she has stories about one of the guys on site telling her, "Oh, you've done it for me today, love." That kind of comments, and you're like, "No, man, I'm here to work. Leave me alone." And yeah.
Wow. So if you were to give advice to someone that was gonna join in the industry, and that's obviously one of the things that happens frequently, what would you tell them? How would you tell them to approach?
There's two different things, right? There's the fact that you have to, if you want things to change, you have to say something, That's my approach of it. If you want things to change, if you don't say anything and say it's okay, it's never going to change. So you have to speak up. Now, the thing is, speaking up, you have to make sure you have the support for it. As in, if you're the intern in a company and your boss doesn't have your back, you can speak up as much as you want. He will throw you under the bus straight away, right? And then you speaking up will look as if you're the difficult person, right? So speaking up is important. The way you do it is pretty much, I think it's the core of it. You have to speak up, but how strongly you do it is pretty much depending on the environment, right? I think as women, we have to protect ourselves and we have to draw a line in the sand. And, all of the Me Too movement and all of that, I think have changed a lot of things. It's not perfect, but the perception has started to change, which is good. Men are a bit more worried about what they say now. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So now we have to be confident that we can now say something, because for a very long time, we didn't have the courage to say something because we didn't think we would be listened to, right? Yeah. Now that has changed. Women, I'm not saying it's perfect. I've had an interesting exchange with some of my colleagues just last week about listening to women, but generally they're more open to it. So speaking up is going to be the first step for the change. Then how you do it will have to be a lot about the person you're talking to.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Like you said, the change starts from the top down.
It very much does. It very much does.
Yeah.
If the leaders are not ready to make any change, then they will just look over. They won't think it's important, so they will look over some behavior that are not acceptable. So the person that's having the problematic behavior will think that they can just keep doing it. Look, and we all do it to a certain point, right? Like if we do something that we know it's wrong, but no one calls us on it,
we keep doing it.
We keep doing it. So, it has to come from above. It has to come from above. If it doesn't come from above, you can speak up about it, but the person doing it, if they don't feel like this is going to be enforced and you're the only one that actually putting some boundaries, not all of them, but some of them won't listen to what you're saying. And eventually you're going to be the one changing job because you can't deal with that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Wow. On another note, thank you so much for that advice. I was going to ask you about roller derby. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Well, I mean, the Australians say roller derby, but, that's because they do the R, they put A everywhere. Yeah, it's roller derby. Yeah.
So you started playing in 2012, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And was that here in Australia?
No, I studied in France. I studied in Paris. Okay. That sport, so the sport is a female sport. Has been, so it used to be around in the 70s and 80s in the US. Apparently it was even on TV at the time, just before, like wrestling and stuff. It was very much a show, and it was very much mixed gender. It was male and female at the time. It was really like wrestling, Then it kind of disappeared in the 90s, and then early 2000 in Texas, some women decided to bring it back. At the time, still as a show, but then because it was only women and they had that rockabilly, atmosphere and all of that, it kind of grew and grew and grew and grew. And then the film Whip It happened in the late 2000, and then it exploded everywhere, right? That's how a whole generation of women like me started the sport, right? Because of that movie. Thank you. If she ever listens to that podcast, thank you, Drew Barrymore, for making that movie, because we owe you a lot.
What do you reckon? This some skills that you learned by playing that sport. Have you been able to sort of transfer into the workplace or even your personal life?
So roller derby is very much a feminist sport. So it grew me as a woman, it grew my confidence as a woman, and I would be a very different person right now if I didn't have that sport in my life. I remember one of the first training I attended, one of my teammate at the time, she out loud say, "I'm a feminist and I'm proud of it." And I was like, you know, because to me at the time, being a feminist, you could see, I had, you know, and like a lot of people do, right? I had that cliche of like angry feminist, you know, don't shave, blah, 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 you know, always angry all the time and like for fight for the wrong cause. We all heard that argument, right? And I was very much in that. And that whole sport made me realize that, well, turns out I'm also a feminist. And I'm very proud of it now. It gave me confidence in myself, gave me confidence in my body, and in my strength. And like I said, my life would be very, very different without that sport. That's for sure.
Wow, that's amazing.
So would you be an
I
advocate
really
for
like that.
anyone like, yeah, sorry.
You
Would
go.
you be an advocate for anyone to do something outside of work, you know, that can cultivate a different set of skills that gives them confidence in, you know?
Yes. So I listened to your episode about that. I thought it was a very good one. Because being defined by your work is definitely something that has its limits generally. And my uncle is very, you know, very good at psychology and stuff. He's always given me that great advice of in life, you got to juggle between three different balls, is work, family, and your own personal happiness, right? And it's all about finding balance between the three. And if you only have one of them, you're not going to be able to juggle as well. Or if one is heavier than the other two, it's going to be so much harder in general, right? They all have to be the same weight, all three of them, to make it able to juggle easily, right? And I think that's a really good image for life in general. Having a hobby helps you forget about work, and having a hobby gives you different skills that you wouldn't get at work. I'm a very, very strong advocate of that. Yeah.
As a high achiever,
yeah.
do you think, yeah, sorry, as a high achiever, do you think that one of, like the analogy you gave, one of your balls just tends to become much heavier than the other, like your work one? Does it take up a lot of the sphere of your life?
Yeah. I struggle with that philosophy. Because, like, so when I was doing roller derby, it became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm very competitive. I like to be perfect and be the best I can be. So roller derby took 70-80% of my life, right? Work was still there, and I'm glad I kept work, because a lot of my teammates actually dropped, you know, were working part-times to be able to play at that level. I never made that choice. I've been tempted many times, but I've never made that choice. But yes, it became bigger and bigger, and I do think that I'm single now after being 10 years with a person, and I do think that's partly because of that time when I was a bit too focused on the sport. And then after that, I focused, I mean, with lockdowns and all of that, it was not much you could focus on, but then I was a bit too focused on work, because I wanted to perform so well, and I had nothing else to focus on, really. So, I mean, my partner was there, but anyway, it was a different story. But yeah, it's a hard balance to find, and I'm struggling myself with it, that's for sure.
Is that one of the reasons why you stopped playing, I guess, professionally?
Yeah. I wouldn't say professionally, because unfortunately I was not paid for it, sadly. But
At a professional level.
yeah, look, I was skating. I was skating probably 10 to 15 hours a week. I had 3 to 4 trainings a week plus gym sessions. I was pretty much training. All of my free time was going towards some kind of training. And I quit partly because when you get higher, and it's true in all parts of life, when you get very high, it's true at work as well, you have a political aspect of it, that I was here for the sport and I was here for the performance. I wasn't here for the politics. And when you get very higher up, there's a lot of politics involved. And it ate me alive, that part. Also because, you know, selections were not necessarily just about your skills. And that's something I was not on with. I was not okay with. And but also it was so much training on top of work, and I was not willing to drop my hours at work for it, because roller derby doesn't pay. It was just too much. It's as if I had 2 full-time job, at the same time, and I could not deal with it. It was just too much. So for those two different reasons, that's why I had to quit. I burnt out is what happened. I burnt out.
You chose yourself.
Yeah, I did, and it was a
That's
great
a win.
decision.
Yeah, that's always a win. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing these stories. As a part of our podcast, and at the end of every interview that we have, we sort of ask a few fun questions, just because of all the stuff that we talk about. So if you would like to play that with us, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Awesome. Sohan, do you want to ask the first one?
Yeah, do you have a favorite movie? Oh, well, other than Whip It.
Actually, it's not my favorite movie because the way they play roller derby in there is not actually quite accurate. But anyway, I think have two. One of them would be The Greatest Showman. I have a thing with musicals, and I absolutely love that movie. It makes me so happy every time. And the other one is the Boat That Rocked. It's about pirate radios on a boat in the 70s, and it's the same. I think the same producer as Love Actually. Different story though.
Okay.
Well, I know you said that you growing up in France wasn't as good, but what were your favorite things about it, about growing up in France?
My favorites about growing up in France. Oh, look, I do miss the food, that's for sure.
The bread.
It hurts. The croissant, les croissants. You can't have a good croissant in Melbourne. You can have a decent one in Australia. You can't have a good one. Yeah, I think the growing up different thing is the open-minding of people. I think the fun and the jokes. We talk more openly about things.
Okay.
So while sexism and all that was not as good at all, I feel like people would talk about it more.
Political correctness
any
in
places...
here is a thing.
Yeah, it's we are very strong-minded, very proud, very but we speak up a lot. We express our emotions a lot, whereas the English are very much the opposite, very much about controlling your emotion. Political correctness, all of that. That's something that I'm glad I had, because I feel like a lot of Australians in general, men particularly, they don't know how to deal with their emotions.
Oh, can't we just dedicate a whole section on that for this podcast and bring you to talk about it?
Yes.
Today we talked about your story, but then we're going to talk about how men just don't.
But do you think that element of just speaking up more is what makes people, I don't know if this comes from England, but the perception that French are rude? Is it just the element of speaking your mind?
Yeah, we don't care as much. Yeah, I do think so. There's part of the fact that we don't care as much, so we just say we just say it, right? We just say it the way we say it the way we think it is, whether that's debatable, but we just say it. We don't care about the consequences as much as here. We don't really care about how it's going to be perceived. We don't really care about everyone else feelings in a way we think. We just say things the way they are.
Okay, this is another question. What is your go-to way to manage stress?
Sports. Surprisingly, I'm a very big sports has been very much my stress relief for my whole life. So when I was a teenager, I was anorexic. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of lack of confidence and all of that. And at the time I was doing horse riding, and horse riding pretty much saved my life at the time. Probably wouldn't be around without that. And ever since, sports has been during stressful times. So preparatory class, for example, was a very, very stressful time, very hard for me. And again, horse riding was the one thing that I kept through it, saved me as well. And then, ever since I get really stressed out, very anxious and all of that, going for a run, going for a skate, that's usually my go-to and gets me, gets me out of that.
I have so many questions,
space.
But
I know.
Oh, thank you for sharing
2.
that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for accepting our invite. It's really good to know that I work with such like nice professionals. It's amazing.
Honestly,
So many things that we have in common, and
Oh, I'm glad that could be of help in like next year.
and
Yeah.
you definitely
Glad.
are going to now be role model. Thank you. Yeah, no, I already said thank you like 10 times, so thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, awesome.